If I took a survey of Central Oregon brewery industry goats, greatest of all times, there is no doubt that Gary Fish and Tony Lawrence would be right at the top of that list. Gary Fish founded Deschutes Brewery in downtown Bend in 1988. Deschutes began as a small pub and is now the 11th largest craft brewery in the US. Tony Lawrence is co-founder and brewmaster of Boneyard Beer, which started with one goal in mind: to make great beer. And I would say that Boneyard has more than accomplished that goal. They are well known for their #1 selling draft India Pale Ale in the Pacific Northwest. That's RPM IPA. You all know it and love it, as well as their Rebel Spirit. How did two of our strongest brands in Bend beer raise the bar? They partner, and that's exactly what they've done, creating a truly unique, one-of-a-kind, Bend-based, local-to-local, craft-to-craft partnership. Please help me welcome to the stage two of our brewing industry veterans and hear more about their joining of forces to be better and stronger together. Tony and Gary, come on up.
These work?
Test.
All right. They asked us what we wanted to do, how we wanted to do this, and I think Tony and I both agreed that we would rather have a conversation with you than provide a lecture. So we're happy to stand up here and talk ad nauseum about our relationship, our history, beer. I mean, we can talk about beer all night if you want, but we'd rather know what you, so please, we'll start, but you guys, we'd rather talk about, I think, what you're interested in more than what we're interested in. As you heard, we started Deschutes Brewery in 1988 as a small pub. Our business plan, we did actually have a business plan. Wasn't a very big one. Yeah. And we started the little pub up here on Bond Street, and Bend was a very different place back then. But we learned and we grew, and the industry helped provide some momentum for us. But in 1989, we hired, pardon me, a skinny little snowboarder from Southern California as a dishwasher. And he very quickly distinguished himself when John Harris, our brewer at the time, said, "Hey, what are you doing? You want to shovel out the mash tun?" The mash tun is a huge, hot, steaming bowl of breakfast cereal.
I spoke with John Harris today, another topic. But
yeah. And at the time, there was no way to get the mash, as they called it, out of this kettle other than to shovel it out with a big grain shovel. And John was tired of doing it, and he asked Tony if he wanted to do it. And in that small gesture, he launched a career for this young guy who didn't know where he was going, but he found his way, and yeah, I'm pretty much gonna stop right there. I'm gonna let you take it, so you can actually tell them the truth of the whole story. So.
Hey guys, Tony here, co-founder of Boneyard, and yes, Gary and I have an amazing, long-standing history. The story is out of this world, and we'll get more into that. And it just pinched myself, and thank you, Gary, for hosting me in 1989 and bringing me into my professional career. And you're a big part of giving me the ambition and the drive, but also, I had my own role in finding my own way. But also, I thank Silver Moon, thanks Edco. We're so happy to be here. As I said, I'm Tony, co-founder of Boneyard, and unlike Tiny Watts, I didn't have a stress test. I was traveling across the Pacific with my products. Products I desired to produce were much more user-friendly, one might say. But If you need a desert island beer, I suggest it be Boneyard. Tiny Watts, collaboration.
I agree.
Yeah, Gary's right. I started at Deschutes in 1989, and what we're here to talk about tonight is a little freestyle conversation with you all, because I think I've partnered up with the right person, the right company, and I'm so excited, and we'll get talking about that. Yeah, you're right. In 1989, I started Deschutes Brewery right down the street, came into town as a little snowboard rat, and I was always interested in beer, Sierra Nevada being a key thing of that. And I needed a job, and I got a job at Deschutes Brewery. And I just had a mutual friend that worked there in the kitchen, as Gary already shared with you, which led to a relationship with John Harris, whom I consider the brewmaster of Oregon, really. Who launched all the original recipes. I think that was on the trivia earlier for Deschutes, the Mere Pond, the Black Porter, the Jubal Ale, et cetera, et cetera. John Harris of now Ecliptic Brewing. I consider him to be the iconic brewmaster of Oregon, and he was my mentor. And but his mentorship at that time, combined with the drive and determination of Gary and Deschutes Brewery, really helped. As Gary said, give me a direction. Did you say that? What did you say?
I'd never forget. So Tony had started Boneyard, and there's a lot of time and stories in between, and we may get to that. But he had started being at the little brewery on Lake Place. And I was really involved with industry issues nationally and locally and everywhere else. And the Beer Institute was a basically Anheuser-Busch's trade association. And the director of that, an ex-Navy commander, came in, a full Washington, D.C. kind of guy, going around visiting people who were on his board, which I was. And I said, look, you want to know what craft beer is about? Let me show you. And we drove over. I called Tony, make sure he was there. We drove over to Lake Place. And Lake Place was truly the Boneyard. I mean, he cobbled this thing together with used pieces and parts, and I'll never forget this. And we're walking around, and Tony's giving us the nickel tour, which is about the size of your garage at home. And Tony said something. He said, "Gary, you'll be so proud of me." I said, "Why? What are you doing?" He says, "I'm writing employee manuals." I thought, this is my guy.
Yeah, that's correct. You failed. One of my favorite memories really is I was cobbling together my brewery, which is very true. The Boneyard thing is much more than you probably
it's
maybe
real.
heard or maybe not heard. Boneyard slang for maybe where I got it from originally was they were going to the Boneyard in Las Vegas of the old neon signs from the Strip. Then there's the Boneyard Airport, the kitchen industries are Boneyard, so our materials that we use to start our brewery were from the Boneyards of many, many breweries around the West Coast that I worked for and what have you. It's not necessarily because repurposing or recycling, it's just because that's the only way that I could figure out financially or creatively to support my project, including the one that you failed to mention. One of my famous the images I like most, this one is of us at the steel yard in Terrebonne, and I was always sourcing weird stainless steel and stuff, and I went out there, there's a whole huge bin of kegs. Kegs cost $150 each, by the way, and when you're like a young brewery trying to make draft-only beer, that's quite a obstacle to overcome. But there was a whole huge thing of Deschutes Brewery kegs out there. So I was able to purchase them for the spot price of stainless that day, and then I painted over them or whatever I did and put them back out.
A little.
But then of course for me that's just one of my favorite stories because it sort of sets the tone for the the full circle of our story from 1989 to 2010 to 2022. There's so many little spots along the way that I find completely interesting.
Oh, we've intersected many times, and what do you guys want to talk about? I mean, we can do this all night if you want, but yeah. But,
my impression, and I'm not in your industry, is that craft breweries were valued very highly a few years ago, and then they seem to not be.
they were valued. Breweries were valued very highly a few years ago, but not so much.
Hey, Gary, I'm going
anymore.
to help you just a little bit. So the people at home can't hear if I don't repeat the question. It's technology. I don't know. Craft brewery were highly valued. You're saying the question has come up, is that no longer the case?
No, I thought the thing that was driving it were that the big labels like Budweiser and Coors weren't growing. Craft brewers were growing, so the big guys were buying the little guys for the growth.
The big guys are buying the little guys. Has something changed?
Valuations are the same as they used to be?
Or have valuations changed? And how do you value a craft brewery?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic that's happened in the industry. There are right about 10,000 breweries in the United States right now. When we started up the street here, there was 150. 4 years before we started, there were maybe 80. And I like to say I spent a great deal of my professional life trying to teach the consumer to embrace variety, which is the opposite of what Anheuser-Busch had been doing up to that point. Go figure, we were successful because that's what people want. But one of the things that Jim Cook, who started Sam Adams, been very successful, said, which I think really is relevant, and I've said the first part, and that is that the industry has gotten to the point where basically the barriers to entry are at zero. You're a home brewer with your homebrew kit. You can fill out a form, write a check for $50 or whatever the regulating authorities want, or as some people do, don't do that at all and just pretend you're ignorant and you're not going to get caught. And you can wheel a keg down to the tavern on the corner where you know the guy that owns it, and he'll put you on tap because you're friends. All your friends, you've been giving your friends free beer for years. They all tell you you're a great brewer. And all of a sudden you're in business. But the tap handle that you got at the tavern came from somebody else. And so it's really interesting where the barriers to entry have come down to zero. The other side of the coin, and this is what Jim added, is that the barriers to exit are therefore at infinity. There's no way out. So we have to find other ways to service that part of the business life cycle. And it's cool, it's fun, I love beer, I love the life I've got, but it's interesting when what constitutes value in a business or in an industry when growth costs nothing, but everything else is expensive beyond reason.
I have a question for the two of you. What are you working on together now?
Thank you, great question. Of course, for me, it's always about the beer. It sounds so obvious to say it's about the beer, it's about the beer, it's about the beer, but it absolutely is. That's just what I grew up doing. It's about the only skill or trade set I have. So what I manufacture and produce better be really good. And so that's what I try to hang my hat on. That being said, I'll speak from the Boneyard behalf, which is with our partnership. I've always been super curious of what these liquids in this brand may have to say up and down the West Coast. You know, primarily Boneyard's been Oregon, strong, Washington, maybe a little Northern California. Feel really good. I got a lot of friends around the country and the world. They're like, okay, you're killing it. I'm like, okay. But you know, our historically pre-COVID or pre-pandemic, our capacity or our manufacturing facilities had a certain capacity on it. And for me, that capacity was I was pretty comfortable where that was, unless I was going to double down, spend 5 or 7 million capex in like the 5-year project and really go super deep. So to partner with Gary and Deschutes is allowing me to be more creative in that ability for my scope of imagination and see what the heck Boneyard has to say from Vancouver, BC to San Diego. Maybe as far as, you know, Idaho, Wyoming, might call Denver, something like that. So for me, it's super exciting to have the opportunity, not just to have the availability by capacity to tap into these emerging markets, but there's so many other things that are happening, which I've never had before. Sales team, never had one. Marketing department, never had one. Art department, never had one. The boardroom was like 2.5 people. And so it's a whole new adventure for me. I get to jump on board with the whole facility, the whole operation, this big ship, and use that vehicle for Boneyard to see what it can say. And again, you know, for me, I've always just been curious. Is there a metric? I don't know what the metric is. Is it volume? Is it pats on the shoulder? Is it top line, bottom line? No, it's just, I'm just curious.
Is it wild things that happen when people drink your product? I don't know. This partnership has been going strong throughout the years in many different ways. You've come back to Deschutes in several different capacities, and I wonder if you could speak to the history of that, because I don't know that that's commonly known to everyone in the community.
Well, yeah, Tony had his own path to follow before coming back to us, but I just want to touch a little bit. Tony talked about, you know, what he gets, and you're right. I mean, we have a lot of things to offer for somebody growing a business like him. But what we get out of that might not be what you're thinking. And, you know, we get sales, we get all that kind of stuff. But to me, the most impactful thing that we've gotten out of our relationship as businesses is that we're learning how to bootstrap again. We're learning how to be entrepreneurial again. We're learning how to be true to our story again. And I'll admit it, we'll be 34 next week. And we need this refresher as an organization, and that we need to be able to relate to how they do it, because they're really good at it.
Yeah, they are. Okay, questions. I know every hand's going to go up. Yes. How do you scale?
How much money do you have?
How do you scale
Or
up?
how much money don't you have?
Right, well, this is two different ways of scaling, right? So this is like a pretty interesting question for the two of you.
Well, I mean, it's really easy if you sell 1 barrel of beer to grow by 100%, because all you have to do is sell 2 barrels of beer. When you're selling 300,000 barrels of beer, doubling is a lot harder. So, you know, it's like growing any other business. You have to have a compelling proposition. You have to have, and this is something that I think craft beer has had a hard time learning over the last 3 or 4 decades, is you have to have a brand that's relevant. There's lots of good beer out there. The ability to make good beer, you know, it used to be that, you know, people would move through the industry because they just couldn't quite get the quality control thing down. That's not really true anymore. I mean, of 10,000 breweries, you know, 6,000 of them are making good beer, really good beer. And so how do you compete within that? you've got to be able to build a compelling brand story as well. So, I mean, and it goes on, but that's really what you're starting to do. And when you're bootstrapping, starting up, it's tough to do.
I got a little something. There's some entrepreneurs in the room, clearly, and if you wouldn't be sitting here if you weren't curious and interested about what it takes, and I'm sure we all have our own lens or filters, whatever you want to call it, and to how you are able to cross over from imagination to execution and beyond. And I just want to say, somehow it's like, what's the difference really between a high risk tolerance and being slightly reckless? Because it takes that to become, it takes that to.
It's a very fine line.
So you figure out who you are.
Sometimes the line moves too.
If you're not willing to get out your own way and take some risk, just get out of the room.
Yeah.
So, some of your colleagues in the state industry have expanded into like road liquor production. Do you guys consider that as a business channel?
Has the idea to expand into other products ever come up, like Rogue starting a distillery? Was that ever on the table for either of you?
Well, as far as Deschutes is concerned, yeah, I mean, whiskey basically starts as beer. I mean, that's fundamentally true. And we have actually a whiskey that we make with Ben Distillery called Black Butte whiskey. It's a 5-year aged American whiskey made basically from a wash of a derivation of Black Butte Porter. And we've had a blast with it. It's not a big part of our business at all, which from my perspective allows us to really focus on the quality, since we're not going to be paying the bills with this product. But yet it's going to carry our brand. We want to make sure it's really, really good, and I think we've done an admirable job with that.
I think the audience agrees. Did you have anything to add to that?
I mean, absolutely. On so many levels. For example, at the most simple origins of what's a restaurant and a bar space if you're a brewer. That for me originally was really challenging. I have one now, but I really told myself I'd never do it. I'm a brewer. I manufacture beer. I'm not going to dilute that with other aspects of considerations, relationships, management levels of the food and beverage space. But I did it. Obviously,
it happens.
I think being here in Bend and with the beer culture and the tourism, I mean, it was a good, solid business move. But I swear I would never do it. But here we are. And we're in the, Boneyard's done some NA stuff with the Elixir CBD project. So, stay hungry, stay thirsty. I'm not so sure. I believe in the project, the food and beverage space, and I believe in the NA Elixir project, and so it keeps us up at night, keeps us up in the morning thinking about the things that we're chasing. So that's all there is to it for me.
Yeah, and we're looking at that space. I mean, we actually had a product that fit more into it was not an exact fit, but fit more into the kind of the seltzer space or the RTD space. And we introduced it in March of 2020.
Wow. Sorry, Gary.
Nobody's perfect. So we may do that again, but right now, our focus is beer, and we're trying to do that as well as we can. And we're still crawling out of a big hole.
Well, the good news
that was
is
dug over the last few years. So
the good news is people still love beer.
Yeah,
so
well,
you did pick a good
thank
product.
goodness.
Yes.
And that's still what keeps me up all night, every night, beer. You know what I mean? It just does.
In good
Tony's
ways
right.
and bad. Aaron.
Question from the virtual audience. There's a reason why there are so many craft breweries in Central Oregon, and a lot of it has to do with collaboration. Gary, what part have you played in the success of other local breweries?
Gary, what part have you played in the success of other breweries as the beer scene here is so successful because of collaboration and partnership?
We were talking earlier tonight about kind of the Deschutes Brewery family tree and how many of the local breweries have been populated with people who came through us, learned how to brew through us, worked, got their training through us and so forth. And they're not just Tony, and Tony's an excellent example, maybe the best. But, we've played a role in that. I was a founding board member of the Oregon Brewers Guild, the first Oregon Trade Association. I was a founding member of the Brewers Association, which is the national trade association for small brewers. It goes on. I spent most of I'm not a brewer, so, I wasn't tied to a schedule for making beer. So I spent a lot of my time trying to build a marketplace, which when we started in 1988 didn't exist. Regulatory understanding of what we were trying to do didn't exist. We had to educate the regulators. For bankers didn't know what we were doing. I mean, the experience that we had when we came to town and the bankers said, we don't loan money to restaurants. Well, it's not just a restaurant, it's a brewery, and we don't know anything about breweries, so we won't loan you money. But it's a restaurant we don't loan money to restaurants. And, this circular conversation repeated itself several times with bankers here in town. And that was the same story happening nationally. So I spent a lot of time trying to create this playing field that we all use now. And that's what I did when, they were making beer.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
Gary.
No,
Gary,
I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, I lamented a little bit because it's ironic, but I wouldn't change a thing.
would you run for office, Gary?
No.
I had to ask, yes.
When you look back, do you have any mistakes that make you laugh today?
When you look back, this is a fun question. When you look back, do you have any mistakes that make you laugh, and what did you learn?
What, you want me to go?
Okay, we'll try it from this side of the stage. Yeah, clearly. I mean, as I kind of shared with you briefly, I think there's a lot of people in this room that either have accomplished or are desiring to accomplish their dreams and aspirations. So you, at least for me, on retrospect, you look at your strengths and weaknesses in the rear view mirror. That's just through my filter, through my lens. How realistic is it? I'm not so sure. That being said, for me, the question applies is this. I think I'm really good at what I do, and that's making beer. But I started a company that kind of blew up, and I wasn't prepared for that. So the ability to identify everyone else's needs within that operation, and for me, again, I already said it's all about the liquids. But to get the liquids I want to produce, you need to identify possibly with the co-workers, co-owners, whatever they may be referred to, and how their cogs or how their things fit into the system. And so, anyhow, if the question was, what would I do different, that was what I would do different. I'd try to be more realistic about what I expect from the people to help me achieve the liquids I'm trying to produce in terms of how they can make it all work out. And so, for me, it's about the liquids. I got so singular focused on that it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, everybody tells you when you're going through tough times, one day you'll look back on this and laugh. Like, no. Maybe smile a little bit, maybe, but yeah, laughing and the things you go through when you're bootstrapping a business. I've told this story before, but in the very early days, our very first, so we opened in June of 1988. By Christmas, or we're coming into the holiday season, fortunately, we had had another drought, and there was not enough snow for Mount Bachelor to open at Thanksgiving, and we're looking at the holidays, and John Harris is the brewer, and John hates it when I tell this story, but he's not here. So we got the brewery had some design flaws, and we got an infection in the brew house, and we made 10 batches of beer that we got an infection that the 10 batches of beer we had to dump down the drain. Now we had no money, we didn't have reserves, we had a firm commitment we would never sell a beer that we weren't proud of, and that was the whole deal, is that no, that was not good, okay, dump it out. And John and I had a lot of late night conversations about, my God, what have I done? You know, I mean, I was still young at that point, but you know, I had risked a substantial part of my parents' retirement. You know, I mean, most people in here understand that. You know, it's not about me, it's about all the people I made promises to. And, you know, we ended up figuring it out, but it's one of those times when they say, you know, you're going to look back on this one day and laugh. It's like, no, I've never looked back on that day and laughed. I'm proud of what we did. I'm proud of what John did. I'm proud of the way we ended up solving the problem. Now, there are lots of things I laugh about. Not that.
No, not funny. I'm sweating just thinking of it. Ryan, how about you?
I have a two-part question.
Great.
One's kind of simple and selfish. I know you guys are beer connoisseurs.
Selfish is good. There's nothing wrong with selfish.
What are you guys
What are you guys
drinking?
drinking?
I'm drinking this Silver Moon. This is a delicious Silver Moon lager,
Pilot Butte.
Pilot Butte.
Yeah,
The
Thank you
Brute
for saying
lager.
that, because
Recommended,
my
I
glass
got
is
you.
pocket.
light,
Got you,
refreshing.
Gary.
You know, sometimes on the beer and the liquids themselves, sometimes they, not so much anymore, but look at brewers and sort of what we do is like making breweries, and brewers want to have these huge, big, flavorful beers, but that's not exactly true. Very clean, very well balanced liquid is always enjoyable, and so this is a really well done beer. And
Yeah, I mean,
doesn't always have to be filled
at a
with hops,
certain
although-
level, these are harder to make than, you know, big IPAs and stouts and everything else, because when you got all that flavor in there, there's a lot of places for flaws to hide. When you kind of strip it down, it's got all
And
be
well,
there.
and if you're making something like Suge Knight, people get in trouble and they have to stop drinking it. I'm not saying I know that happened. I'm just saying I know that did happen, actually. There was a second
They get in
question you
trouble
had.
allegedly.
Get in trouble allegedly.
Allegedly.
People I heard have done this.
Yeah, so my second question is, as far as beer and trends, like, how do you make decisions between trying to be a trendsetter as a beer?
Oh, this is a great question for these two. So we're talking about beer and trends. How do you make decisions in terms of trends and to trend or to not to trend? I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Actually, it's an interesting subject, and I can speak. I mean, we actually talk about that quite a lot as a management team. And, you know, you want to be the trendsetter, right? But you can't ignore where the consumer goes. Ultimately, you know, when we were small and starting out, you know, and there were a lot of brewers in America that were talking, you know, we drink what we want and sell the rest. You know, there's all kinds of those kinds of slogans where, you know, it's about the beer, and I agree with Tony, it's about the beer. I would argue it's not about the beer, it's about the people. But it's actually tougher to draw that line. I mean, you don't want to ignore what the customer's telling you. Quite to the contrary, you must pay attention. But do we all want to be the first horse out of the gate and run all the way to the finish line without contact? Of course we do. But that's really hard. And with 10,000 breweries all spinning out 30, 40, 50 beers a year, I mean, do the math. It's hard.
Are you following those closely?
Are you following the trends and trying all the
As
stuff?
much as my liver will allow.
You know, I might try a slightly different approach on that, but you know, I'm old and stubborn, and I'm fortunate to travel the world and hang out with breweries all around, and what they're doing in Europe is completely different than what we're doing here. Not completely. They're trying to make, you know, American IPAs, but they've got their own take, and so many different things are happening around the world. But it is about liquids, and as the brewer in me, if I'm not chasing and attempting to manufacture liquids I'm inspired by, I'm interested in, I just don't think I'm going to get the results that I'm looking for. So what that means is, like, for example, I've never made a hazy IPA. You know, the consumer may want it, but I'm not interested in it, so I'm not going to go down that pathway and make one. I think from a business perspective, it's probably a mistake, but that's just, again, if I'm not that interested in it, then I'm not going to do the homework. I'm not going to perfect the style, so therefore I won't do it.
You're an artiste, Tony.
But
Lawrence.
what's really, I just want to touch on something Tony mentioned, which is kind of fascinating, because we all started way back when trying to create more of a European beer culture in America. I mean, American beers had become monolithic. You know, you were Bud Miller and Coors. They had kind of a very similar flavor palette. There wasn't a lot of variety. So we took our lessons from Great Britain, from Germany, from Czech Republic, from those places. What happened was American interpretations of their cultures became popular. And all of a sudden, those European breweries are now trying to imitate American IPA. I mean, it's ping pong across the Pacific or across the Atlantic. I mean, it's really a fascinating thing, but it's actually absolutely true.
Couldn't be any more true. Again, I travel the world, and what I'm seeing happening is when I worked the first time at Deschutes or with Gary in the 90s, all the literature and all the inspiration came from, you know, UK and Germany and things, and now they're all inspired by us. And what a difference a couple decades makes.
Jubile Ale, our first holiday seasonal. The word Jubile came from Jubel, which means to celebrate in German, and ale, which was the English. So it was a German-English conjunction that we made, and the beer was trying to blend those two holiday styles from Britain and Germany, and that was where we drew our inspiration.
Long live
at the time.
Jubile. Such a great contribution.
I do think it's fun to add that it's every 10 years the game changes, and so 30 years ago is what we were trying to make then was exactly what we were supposed to be making, and somewhere in the last 15 years the game has flipped as the confidence and the morphs and the twists that the brewers are producing based off the origin styles have adapted, and it's just about adaptation.
Yeah.
And
What's really fascinating, it's fun to do to travel to Europe, and you find the Germans, who are fairly rigid, to say the least. You know, the German purity law of 1560 or whatever was created to say that beer can only be made from 4 ingredients, and we're over here putting everything, you know, whatever we want. You know, there's the McMenamins famous, you know, Mars bar incident where they in the early days they were touring some reporters through, and they say, oh, there was a mash going, and oh yeah, we can put anything in there. It's like, here, there's a candy bar here. throw, and that the Mars Ale came from that. So we're Americans. We're
Plaid shirt. What is one piece of advice someone had given you when you were early stage and you were getting ready to scale? What do you wish someone had told you? That's a great question.
It's interesting, and I thought about that in listening to two great presentations and really cool products and cool industries and cutting edge, and to me, they're a niche product in a niche industry. We were niche products in niche industries of our own, and the whole, to be overly simplistic is like stick to your quality angle. I mean, both you guys, all of you guys, girls, y'all. I don't know what you do now.
Yeah, all y'all is great.
But,
That's great.
no, but you both businesses had a firm commitment to a higher quality product. Don't lose that. There's going to be all kinds of pressure to compromise, to bring your price point down, to do all that kind of stuff. Your angle, because you're so small, the only way you can compete is to be better than everybody else.
This is so kind of strange to say, but my project was so scrappy that no one wanted to even give me advice. They're like, this is not gonna work. It was. So, I mean, it was against all odds, and so when you're that far to the left or whatever side you're any what have you, it really was such a strange project that it was against all odds and it was not supposed to work, and so I wasn't listening whatsoever because you had to, it wasn't. You had to believe.
Yeah, well, you came on the scene in a really interesting moment in time where I think people were really thirsty for exactly what you brought. So good work trusting your higher self, Tony.
A little funny story. My partner Gretchen's over here, and she, we're together now, but like 12 years ago, she's like, "Was that your effing truck I just saw drive down the street in Portland?" And so while I think our liquids are pretty good and our branding was a little edgy, but it is about, we got lucky with some timing as well.
Yeah.
Put the right liquid on the table at the right time, at the right culture. And so when our truck was rolling down the street in Portland with all these, the questionable branding images that were not typical of the craft beer space, but the consumer was ready for that. They were ready for a new take on things. So while I think we put some good liquids on the table, we also just got lucky. Right place, right time with the right thing.
There is nothing, and I've said this 1,000 times since we started the brewery, there is nothing that beats being in the right place at the right time.
Hit me.
Life question. What's your two most favorite beers or experiences in enjoying your beverage?
What are your two most favorite beers or experience enjoying your beverage?
And then a biz dev question.
Biz dev.
What would you have changed in the recent partnership between the two of you with Boneyard and Deschutes?
What would you have changed in the recent partnership between the two of you with Boneyard and Deschutes?
Well, the partnership hasn't gone on too long. I think, we're still learning about each other, but I can tell you, and I mentioned it earlier, I think what Deschutes is getting from Boneyard is invaluable right now, and that's going to go on for a while. As far as, beer and experiences, you asked the question a little different. I'm thinking, oh God, here it comes again. What's your favorite beer? But it's very cool, and I have my theory, and the people that know me know it's time and place. It is the most remarkable experiences I've had if you know, I'm not a big Guinness lover. Guinness is fine. There's nothing wrong with the beer. It's good. But Guinness in the around the world bar on top of the brewery in Dublin, Ireland, is freaking unbelievable. And I'm not a big Rauch beer, smoked beer fan, but in Bamberg, standing outside Ex-Schlenkerla on the cobblestone streets, drinking a pint of smoked Bock, it's like magic. Magic. And it happens, it happens, you could do it at a distillery, at a winery, you know, but there are times when you want to package that moment and be able to take it home with you so that you can pull it out once in a while and remember.
For me, quickly on the beer side, absolutely speak to what Gary says, as well as what rabbit hole I'm going down currently on my quest as a liquid producer. Like, you know, this IPA, this thing, and so, you know, recently we were down in Oakland, in fact, and been hearing about Ghost Town Brewing, and I walked into Ghost Town, and so, you know, I identify with their culture and who they are, and you know, what have you, but the IPAs they're producing just blew me away. And I'm an IPA guy from beginning to end, and so, you know, it's always a little bit of time and place, as Gary speaks, but that was the most recent experience that I just walked away going, taking notes, taking those screenshots, and going like, hey guys, check it out. And as far as the other component, you know, I think there's some of the other people on stage this evening looking for strategic partnerships and stuff, and it can be absolutely amazing. It will change your, you know, for me, I'm super excited not to be the HR department anymore, or sign the checks, and create lots of opportunity.
We got you covered.
I think that's a really, really beautiful place for us to say, are there any final things that you want to add to any of this? I think we could keep going for hours, but both of what you just shared was so lovely.
I do. Thank you, Gary. I mean, we've been running around for 30-something years now. It is a true full circle story. It's absolutely, for those of you that weren't there, Cassie, you were there. It's kind of, you know, you hear about it, you read about it, but it is an absolute amazing craft beer story. It's an amazing Ben story, and it's an amazing story for this gentleman right here, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks. But it goes, for me, it goes deeper than that, because, you know, when the student becomes the teacher, you know you've really fully kind of done it. And that's what I'm experiencing right now.
We rehearsed this an hour ago, by the way.
I mean, for my part, I just want to say, my grandma's 89. She hasn't left her room for 6 months. And the two of you up here, 99 and 100, absolutely smashing it. It's amazing. You guys are killing it. Truly an honor to have you both here. And there's no way we could really track the ripples that you all have added to our community in a variety of different ways. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us. And keep going. We support you 100%.
Thank you all.
Stay thirsty.
And we have a gift. I got a PubTalk mug for you, so you can bring this back, this giant stein, and we will fill it up with whatever liquid you are craving at the moment. So bring it back. There you go. There we go. I hope somebody's getting a picture of this. I mean, Gary Fish and Tony Lawrence. Keep it going for Gary and Tony.